Well, hello everybody. As you can see, this is Grab a Seat episode 2 on college access and success. Today I'm here with Sanela. Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Sanela. I am part of the communications team with ICCAP, and I am a current student at National University.
And my name is Gonzalez Pebe. I'm from the University of Southern California, and I'm from the ICAP Policy, Budget, and Advocacy team. And so we have a few questions prepared to discuss more about the differences and generally speaking about private versus public education. So if you'd like to, Sanela, you could start.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go ahead and kick us off then. So the first question is pertaining to private versus public education, and if maybe one is better than the other. What do you think?
Well, personally, I wouldn't say one is better than the other, especially when, depending on the state, depending where you're living, the range of courses, education, culture as well, and like people overall, it can be very different. So it's more about fitting your needs, whether you prioritize your education, the environment, the opportunities after college, what you really want to pursue as well sometimes, because there are universities and colleges with like specialized programs, and it definitely depends on what you are looking for rather than looking for the big 20s and the ones who give you the most.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. And yeah, I mean, on that note, I don't believe that one is inherently better than the other. Really, I think it just comes down to a student's preference. Like you said, if you are looking at maybe a top 20, then it's definitely good to look into. But really, it comes down to what's going to make you as a student the most successful. So I don't think one has a clear benefit over the other.
Exactly. Well, then we can go to question number two since it kind of links. So why, Sanela, why would attending a private school be important?
Well, private schools do have their own benefits that maybe a public university might not have. So, a private university isn't necessarily important to consider when you're applying for school. It's really just going to be looking for what you want in your school.
Yeah, I'll be honest, when I was looking for colleges during my application cycle, it's ironic that I'm from USC, but um, I was so skeptical about private colleges because the stigma of like being too expensive, sometimes
Mhm.
low income students not fitting with the culture, with the people overall. But definitely when the universities and the private institutions have, for example, financial aid packages and great financial aid overall, it attracts you because not only are they do they have a quote unquote a better social status, let's say, like unfortunately, but as well sometimes they can have, depending on the university that you're looking for, some type of unique programs or unique opportunities only for that student from that place. So even though I wouldn't say it's important for you to attend a private school, I do see that sometimes there can be exclusive opportunities only for private students. However, I've currently seen like a growing number of programs, especially with uh like ethnic based organizations and nonprofits working towards creating these special uh programs and incentives and like work secure jobs and like other types of opportunities for students who are in public universities or even community college.
Mhm.
So there's definitely like a growing range of opportunities for a broad type of students overall.
You hit on some really interesting points. So, our third question is, asking is private education more expensive? And so you mentioned, stigma associated with the cost of private education and things like that. And you are completely right, right? Like private education isn't the cheapest option for a lot of students, but it is important to consider when you are looking at attending a school to look at financial aid packages, and just different benefits that the school can provide you to help alleviate some of those costs.
Definitely. And this actually links to our next question. Is private education more expensive?
Mhm.
Well, we have seen current inflation, unfortunately, in many schools. I
Yes.
don't know about National University, for example, so maybe you could broaden the light on that.
Mhm. Um, as far as national goes, they have done a really good job in controlling costs for students. So yeah, I do attend a private university as well, and they have done an excellent job in assisting students with financial aid packages, which is, a big reason why I mentioned that, because it is so helpful for students. But then there's also additional things that students can get. There's the FAFSA in California, there's the Cal Grant. So there's just a lot of wonderful programs to help offset some of those costs.
Yeah, honestly, when you mentioned the FAFSA and the Cal Grant, I was like, yeah, that helped me a lot as well. Even like for room and board, since in USC specifically, for example, we have free tuition for families who are under 80K of income a year.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I'm part of that initiative. I'm one of the recipients and I have free tuition, but I know that unfortunately not for a lot of universities that's guaranteed.
Mhm.
So there's definitely that comes into hand. And the reason why I chose USC, like in contrast to other public universities and community colleges, since even though private education can sound like the dream or like the place that you really want to go, unfortunately, there is the financial barrier, and many students opt out because the history that the US has with student loans has just become so detrimental for older generations that just the younger ones are like trying to not get into that at all.
Absolutely, and that's where doing your research really comes into play. National University, for example, they do rotating scholarships for students. So last year they offered half off on tuition for students that qualified. This year they did offer a slightly less discount, but I mean, it was still an amazing discount, third off of your tuition, right? And so that's where, doing your research. USC, I had no idea that they do a program like that. So that is the coolest and, most amazing thing to help students be able to achieve their dreams in getting educated.
Yeah, definitely. And especially when you come from a low income family, you want to make sure that you don't stay in that type of economic threshold, especially when you're trying to break that barrier and try to help your family in any way possible.
Mhm.
That was my case. So definitely like looking for those types of universities that had like full scholarships or partial scholarships or anything that could help. And even though FAFSA and the Cal Grant helps, it doesn't like fully offset all of the tuition, room and board, and sometimes like even like the living expenses, because in case of California, the city is expensive and the state is overall. Yeah,
Yeah.
so definitely like financial aid helps.
Yeah, and I feel like any little bit helps. For me, it was important to not graduate with a bunch of student loan debt, which is where I feel like, National University has done a phenomenal job for me. And, just fit my needs overall. So that is great.
Yeah, okay, so let's go to the next question actually.
So
Are there differences in the education that is received when it comes to private education? What do you think about that?
I don't think so. The quality itself of education, I don't think there is necessarily a difference. I am a transfer student. I have transferred um, from out of state and from private and public universities. So, as far as the quality of education itself, I honestly have not seen a huge difference in that. But I have seen that, with the private university like National, I have had significantly smaller classes, which has given me a lot of comfort and, ability to connect with the professors and be able to ask questions that I need. So as far as, a student is concerned, I think just weighing certain pros and cons. For me personally, I felt like a smaller class size just fit better for me.
Honestly, I agree with that because I was about to say just logistics, which is like the class size, and then as well like the culture. So that would be, how open the community is in the university. Uh, I would also maybe the types of courses maybe in like public universities are less specific programs, but not necessarily it doesn't necessarily affect the quality of education. It's more of a just what type of programs and classes they actually offer. So, and besides, like any other type of education, you can sometimes even take online or over the summer. So it isn't that, it affects your education as a whole.
Absolutely. And, private universities are all over, right? So it's also easy enough to maybe find a university that offers a program that you do like. So if one doesn't offer a specific program, it's always easy enough to look at a different university. But I think you are right. I think public universities do tend to have more of a range in their degree offerings.
Yeah. And for private, I do see as well that sometimes certain classes are not accessible, especially like, yeah, you do have the preference once you're a senior, but sometimes certain departments close or the classes are not available, or even certain important faculty members that are supposed to teach specific classes are not going to teach it. So it's definitely tricky. And there's like some points of comparison, but not always between private and public.
That is true. And that's, for me, pros and cons for sure, where you're looking at that and just seeing what is going to fit the best. Um,
Yeah.
so the last question that we have then is, what do you think needs to be done to make private education more accessible if it's not already?
Well, there's definitely a need for outreach since, as you know, you just found out USC has the 80K initiative. I personally did not know of that either until like before my application cycle. So there's definitely like a need for outreach in the case of USC, but overall for other universities as well, for low income students, more financial help in order to not get into those to get into student loans that most possibly they are not able to pay for at least a decade or two.
Mhm.
And for the middle class specifically as well, there is I wouldn't call it uh the worst crisis, but there is a growing crisis right now for student loans as well because they can't necessarily pay all of the loans, yet they are not considered for financial aid packages and instead only like for merit based.
Mhm.
So especially I have friends, for example, at USC who still have to get at um like more than 100K loans,
Wow.
even though they should get financial aid, but because they're a little bit above the threshold of the 80K a year for their family income, they can't really receive sometimes good financial aid packages. And it is unfortunate because I also see that happening with other friends of mine in other universities, not only in California, but uh, near Boston, near Florida. So it's definitely a problem that we should address soon rather than later.
Absolutely. I mean, college is hard to afford. And so as I picture maybe a freshman where they don't have the merit quite yet, right? Trying to figure out how to navigate college life and be able to prove to them to the university that they are deserving of a financial aid package. So absolutely, I do agree that it is very hard, especially for low and middle income families. I think having more robust policies and programs available to students would definitely help. So for California specifically, right? Having a larger Cal Grant program available to students and just more funding available to them would definitely help in a student's decision to apply to school even.
Yeah, and I do realize that, California is one of I wouldn't say most liberal, but at least when it comes to a lot of public policy and a lot of like programs and initiatives is really open into helping the people
Mhm.
and students overall, especially with healthcare, with any type of mental health services, and like with funding. But it isn't enough for the rising cost of living and tuition, and especially with inflation going all around the country, it's just like a sinking ship.
Yes, I agree. And, policies definitely. I know New Mexico, I think they had just implemented the policy recently, or they're in the process of implementing a free university to bachelor's level students. And so, yeah, it's an
That
amazing program. And I'm very grateful that California is doing what they can, right, in terms of Cal Grant, because any little bit helps when you're looking at college. And, if it's the difference of having 100,000 or, 25,000, like it's still a lot, but, you're not hopefully going to be paying that back forever.
Yeah, and especially like I'm also like part of the work study program, and that actually like that helps a lot as well. Not only because you're able to pay for whatever remaining costs you need to cover, but as well because you're also able to fund outside and external expenses that you may need for like day-to-day living, and hell, like include it in your resume.
Yes.
So yeah, any afterthoughts?
No, I don't think so. I think that this was a very great discussion, and very important discussion to kind of highlight the different programs and just overall thoughts and feelings on private education. I think it just kind of circles back to, a lot of students may not realize that private education is actually a lot more affordable than they really think.
Well, but yeah, I do agree. And there's definitely a lot of there's a growing need to address not only like the stigmas between for public education, but as well the growing cost of private. So yeah, well, thank you everyone for listening to our short but sweet podcast episode, and I hope you will listen to more soon.
Thank you.
Bye.